Okay, go ahead.
Wait, does one of us just share a screen?
Sure. Yeah, I already allow any of you to use the screen, to share the screen.
Okay, I can do it. Wait, sorry, one sec.
That's okay.
Actually, no. Okay, can everyone see it?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay.
Yeah. So I guess if we want to introduce ourselves, I'm Kyle.
I'm Josh.
I'm Eugenia.
I'm Arup.
And today we're going to be talking about biometric identification as a replacement to like card IDs, like driver's licenses, when you're buying alcohol or cigarettes in the store. So we have quite a bit of background because this is based on a real case that happened recently. In New York, a bill was recently introduced to the floor of the state Senate that if it's approved, it'll allow local bars and stores to use biometric identification. So things like fingerprints, facial and retina scans as a substitute to the traditional ID card or driver's license. So it promises greater ease of access with transactions that normally require age verification, like if you're 21 or over, and it removes the need for customers to have their physical ID on the ready at all times. So it's sponsored by Senator James Skoufis. But basically it charges the New York State Department of Health and the State Liquor Agency with creating the necessary infrastructure to implement the system. But it doesn't go into much detail on how that should be done, besides saying that it should be stored in a centralized, highly secure, encrypted database. So while the bill lays out the framework for implementing it, it doesn't really go into much detail. So our group recognizes the inevitability of a biometric system like this being developed soon because of recent advancements in IoT, and that what happens in New York here will most likely pave the road for the rest of the country in terms of digital identification. So because of that, it's important that we take the proper research and precautions to improve the future of biometrics as a whole. So our research for this is going to be split into two parts mainly. The first one is about the implementation of this like biometric system. So who would be in charge of hosting the database or different parts of it, like who the transaction technology or etc. We'll be focusing on like a corporate, government, and nonprofit organization approach, as well as a little bit of talks about peer-to-peer and blockchain also. And then the second issue that we'll be talking about is about the scope. So like how much information should be like told to the bar owner at a given time about the customer. For example, like whether it should just tell them their age, or also like, okay, yes, you're approved or not, because of potential ups and downs with different ethical systems. So, and because of that, we're going to be analyzing these two parts of the implementation and the scope using deontology and utilitarianism. So the government already has its own database on US citizens with all of our ID cards and driver's licenses. So initially it'll be the one in charge of giving that information officially to other organizations, or itself. But our project, we're looking into who might be hosting it. So first, if the government was the one who was hosting this biometric identification, it could benefit from having a centralized database because, as I already said, everyone's already in the system, and it would be a lot easier to promote that and have the system working for everyone. However, a study from Pew Research said that only 20% of Americans say that they trust the government, and only 6% of adults say that they're very confident that it'll keep their records private and secure. Oh, sorry, I didn't realize we were. I was still talking on my side. I'll keep it more brief then. Sorry. The other basis would be like a corporation. Also, it's supposedly more trustworthy in terms of the public view, but could also have its own incentives that play into the way, such as gaining profit. And then also a potential nonprofit organization could maybe have more of a balance between trust and not earning a profit, but it could have other problems such as it's usually pretty hard to establish a nonprofit organization, especially against the like competition and free market economy like the one we have.
Next, we'll talk about our development process. So we realized like that our main goal to make our technology more widespread would be to have the public accept it. So we wanted to address the main concerns that we thought the public would have. One of which was privacy issues. The public might be wary of giving their information in order for the bioinformatic scanning to work. And another concern they might have is that the information, like how the information will be used. We wanted to ensure that the information will be used in ethical ways and not like sold for profit. And a third concern that the public may have is how the information is stored. If it's not stored securely, they might be worried that a hacker might get the information and use it in unethical ways. So one approach we brainstormed was having a direct link from the government to the establishment, which in this case would be like the bars. And so this minimizes the potential for data leaks because there's fewer individuals that will have access to the data in between the bar and the government. There's fewer steps, so it'll be more simple and more secure. But one problem is that a lot of adults in America don't trust the government, so they might not be willing to give their data to the government. And another approach we brainstormed was having a link from the bar to a corporation to the government. So in this case, the government or the corporation like Google or Apple would store the information and return the verification of the individual's age to the bar. And the benefits of this is that corporations usually have higher tech and they have more experience, so it would be the data would be more secure because they're used to storing data. But another downside would be the trust, because although more people trust corporations than the government, there's still a high level of distrust.
Okay, and then the third approach that we're looking at is kind of using a nonprofit organization. So with this, the public is more likely to trust a nonprofit organization because they know that they're not susceptible to any like monetary like bribes or anything like that. So public trust in that the nonprofit will do the right thing is like definitely a benefit with this method. But again, like with the nonprofit, the challenges lie in like gathering enough funding to make the system completely secure. So that is a place where public distrust could come in like the validity and the security of the system that the nonprofit creates. So we think if done successfully, having a nonprofit manage the database could significantly reduce like the cost for like all the customers and also keep the data really safe if they were able to get enough funding. And this would be kind of like the most trustworthy in the public's opinion if done correctly. Okay. And now when we look at like the scope of the system, this is like another consideration that we have to take into account when, like sort of creating and developing the system, which is like how much information does the receiving bar get to see. So potentially the bar would be able to see a customer's criminal history or activity with alcohol use or abuse. So we're kind of analyzing this action from two perspectives, so deontology and utilitarianism. So from a deontological perspective, there are deontology says that like we don't care about the consequences of this action. There are just like specific things that are immoral or like ethical and unethical, and they're just like set rules. So being able to see a customer's criminal history and history with alcohol use without them knowing would be considered like an invasion of privacy. So from deontology, this would be considered unethical since the customer is unaware of what is going on, and an invasion of personal privacy is just inherently immoral. But when we look at utilitarianism, we're kind of looking at, does this action benefit the majority? And if it does benefit the majority of people, then it would be considered an ethical or a correct choice. So if the bar is able to see more of a customer's history, they could be able to prevent any like bar fights or attacks from the customer if they're able to see like what is this person's past history with alcohol. When they get when they have a few drinks, they get really violent, and they could prevent them from entering the bar. And that could be potentially life-saving for the rest of the customers inside of the bar.
So for our feedback, the majority of feedback we got from you, Professor Wu, and the solution you gave to us, or you suggested to us, was using blockchain technology instead of having a centralized server or database to store the data and to return if their age is valid or not. And so the benefit of this solution is that there's no like one organization that's in charge of hosting the data and analyzing the data. And this solves the issue of public distrust, since if there is one organization that the public can distrust, that like the government or a corporation. And also another benefit of this would that it would reduce storage costs and potentially increase security by making the data harder to hack and get into.
So as a group, we've chosen to have a nonprofit hold and deal with the data storage from the government. And we talked about all of the other methods, but we chose this one especially because it inspires the most amount of trust in the system that we're trying to implement from the public. When you have a nonprofit, it's a lot easier to be tracked, and there is the least amount of incentive for this organization to sell the data out to other third parties or to do malicious things with it. And we've also talked that the blockchain, if we were to use a blockchain, it may seem too complicated for the general population to get behind. But
I think Joshua, you were like frozen for 15 seconds.
And he's still frozen for me.
Yeah, I think he's still frozen. Okay. Yeah, before he came back, just some question for you guys. My understanding about the privacy you were talking about, there are two sources of concern. One concern is, I think you point out, is for the bar to knows about your history, right? And how about for the government to know about your history? Is that also the concern, right? There's two concerns. You don't want government to know your pattern of consuming the alcohol in various bar, and you don't want the bar to know that you have a history related to that. I mean, I think one of you mentioned that there was a positive side, like a safety side about this as well. Yeah. Okay. So, okay, let me actually I don't know if you consider this approach, but this is the approach to protect the customer privacy. Is basically generating fake query. So if I want to prevent the government to know about what kind of how much alcohol I consume every month, so I'm just basically submit request from like 10,000 bar in New York every day, 10,000, and then they will submit to the database. So that is basically you create a lot of noisy and doesn't make sense data. You can still verify if the purpose is try to verify your age, then you can actually submit a lot of requests, assuming is free or nearly free. Then in that sense, that the government know you probably have consumed some alcohol, but they know nothing about the amount that you have. That's a one trick. We actually play this kind of trick against Google. So Google will know what's your interest based on the what kind of things you're looking for, right? So in fact, this is a paper that I and my student published around 2007 or 2008. We actually we calculate what's the optimal way of generating a lot of fake Google query, such that Google cannot derive so much information about what your true interest is. So that if you only care about verifying the age, then that's the one thing you can possibly hide, such that they don't know. Okay, hey Joshua, we lost you. I think you. I just hear you start saying blockchain, and then
Yeah, how much did I get through before my internet cut out?
you probably want to restart this slide. That's
All
fine.
right,
Yeah.
I got you. All right. So we also talked about the reasons why we chose the nonprofit over everything else, and especially why we chose it over the blockchain. And the thing about the blockchain as our two main things were that it was less scalable, and that having a blockchain might seem too complicated for the general population to get behind. We talked about having a nonprofit over a regular corporation. And if a regular corporation holds the data, it definitely raises questions for user data security, as the public is totally, they know that many other corporations have sold their data in the past. And when we have something as needed to be protected as someone's biometric ID, the number one thing that we need to uphold is user privacy. And we do believe that a nonprofit does this the best way. So we've learned about the ethical concerns of biometric identification, the different ways to host sensitive information, and the potential of blockchain technology to do this. And we believe that biometric identification in the future can be used in a larger scope and will definitely need to be gradually implemented to gain public support. Thank you.
Okay. So I'm going to ask a few questions. First, just for clarification. I actually see 3 requirements in the solution you pick. Regardless of what you pick, there are 3 requirements you want to satisfy. Number 1, you want the bar be able to verify something about the customer. You need to verify, right? Whether it's age, whether his past behavior. And the second requirement is privacy. And here privacy is a little bit complicated, because you have different requirement, a different privacy concern. Number 1, you don't want either as a government or nonprofit organization cooperate to know about your spending pattern. It's like pretty much is like you might not trust your credit card company to actually be able to track where you actually spend your money. If you think about that, that's very similar situation. On the other hand, you want to make sure that during your presentation, you mentioned that there is pro and cons about having the bar knows about your history through this service, right? I want to know whether not just your age, but also your behavior and things like that. Okay, so in my opinion, the kind of requirement that's actually for the bar to want to get the information from the whatever the database, the bar is going to find out any kind of behavior information and maybe some kind of information about what kind of wine you like to have. I mean, for example, and that will be, I should say that will open another huge can of worms because there are so many concerns about privacy over there. When you actually walk in to any bar, you essentially give a ticket for the bar to be able to access a lot of information about you. And that is actually a huge different issue than saying that I want to prevent government actually be able to tracking how I spend my time as in the bar or what kind of how often I do that. I do want to say that today we already we actually don't have that already. So when the law enforcement want to investigate each one of us, I believe that they can, if they can get a warrant or something, they can probably get access our credit card record. If you can see our credit card record, it's pretty much there. Okay, so that is something which I think is fairly easy for us to decide what to do because the case is simple. But I want to go deep into the trade-off. I think the most interesting part to me is the trade-off between the information the bar can actually grab from the database. How do you actually see the trade-off between doing something good for other people in the bar, such as preventing some dangerous behavior, versus try to protecting this particular customer? How do you actually draw the boundary between those two?
Yeah, so I think also kind of what you were saying, I think, because right now, obviously bars already track like how much sales they're making of different products, but I definitely agree that with biometric identification, regardless of how much information they're getting on you from whatever database, they already have like a de-anonymatized like code or ID that correlates with you, and they can start like tracking. I mean, I think usually credit cards and stuff, it might be a little bit similar already, I don't know, but it definitely like does lead to more issues about like tracking individual like activity at a bar. But yeah, I think the line, let's see, because being able to have that kind of like data being told to you about like criminal activity, I think a lot of bar owners would definitely advocate for being able to know that, because it definitely would create a safer environment. And especially if there were some bars that were able to do that and get information about, like, let's say a bar like excludes people who have that kind of activity, then it becomes like a safer place and people want to go there. And then it creates like a competition for everyone to want to like have that safer place. And then it kind of kicks people out who maybe like messed up one time and then now they can never go to, if starting with bars and then maybe even like stores or other places in the future. So I think it's definitely like under utilitarianism, like we were saying, it definitely would benefit the majority. So in that perspective, it probably would be best to like not have that information being told to the bar owner. But like Eugenia was saying, under more of like a deontology approach, it is kind of more of an invasion of privacy on that one individual person. And like kind of taking that away from them would not be like good ethically.
I also think like kind of going off that, if this was kind of like released to like and implemented, I think if people actually found out like what was going on, I feel like there would be a lot of like public outrage that like those bars are able to see everyone's criminal history. I think in general, like people probably aren't really initially considering that it benefits the majority, and their main concern is going to be like their privacy is being invaded. And if like if they're releasing like their criminal history, then there's like other stuff that they could be releasing. And I think it opens a lot of doors for people to just like really distrust like going into establishments like that. So I guess that's like another consideration that I haven't thought about much.
I feel that I feel we can accomplish that without revealing the privacy to the bar. Let me actually give you an example. Instead of for the bar receive the raw information about your criminal history, the bar can actually submit a Python program, which basically has a bunch of query, a bunch of rule about what kind of customer we don't want. And that program is going to send it to the database and doing the program there, and the return just yes or no. This customer will be admitted or not. And in fact, that Python program will be already public. Before you actually go to a bar, that Python program, you can download it yourself. And you can already check, you submit the same program to the government or to that database to see whether I'm qualified to go or not before you actually go there. So in that sense, that number one, the bar will not be able to receive the raw information at all. He just knows the result. You might be either DUI or you might actually kill somebody or whatever. I don't know, but I know some of your profile information kind of trigger you. So if both the customer and the bar holding the same Python program, they can actually check. It might be more, how do I say that? It might be more transparent. It's not transparent in the way that the customer still might not know why exactly what's in my profile. He might know if he challenged whatever nonprofit or whatever holding that database. They can actually do that. Yeah. So the key thing I'm actually thinking right now is that so there is a database, and this database is being updated with every customer's some kind of history or profile information, all sort of information. And then we have a program be able to do that, to do a check. I guess the interesting part, I mean, you're talking about just about the biometrics to enter a bar, but this could be generalized to the information that an organization such as government, corporate, or nonprofit is actually storing for each one of us. And I think that information about what information being stored for me should be accessible for each one of us, and such that you will be able to know whether there is something surprise you. I think as long as that one is done, the only thing you need to worry about is whether that information can be abused by the organization that's actually hosting that information. So that at least then we only have a 1 point of failure, which is that organization, regardless whether it's government or corporate or nonprofit. Yes, Kyle, you want to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to add, like, with the different methods of controlling the database too, I feel like maybe with a nonprofit or some other like more decentralized like P2 peer-to-peer or like blockchain approach or something, you could have, like you were saying, where a Python program or something that gets that kind of information, like they would be available to the customer. But I feel like in the other two cases, for example, if a corporation was in charge of storing the database, they could just have like scan your finger here, and then it sends that information to like their database, and then it could be like totally like copyrighted, like whatever their programs and stuff that they use, it may not be public. Or also like if the government does it, they might have their own. They might like, I know they can't. It might be like seizable under like public record or something, but they might argue that it's like a like theft deterrent or like a terrorist, like anti-terrorist program or something that they can't leak to the public. So, I mean, I definitely agree that there should be some like that should be accessible, but I think it definitely goes down more of a slope of people might arguing different ways about whether it should be or not.
I think you're muted.
Thank you. Thank you, Eugenia. So I'm thinking about following what you guys talk about this line of work. If I have a database and I will be able to access what information about me is being stored in that database, should I be able to also know every time there is any request, anybody submit a Python program, should I know that, number one, when this happened, what is a Python program? Number three, which organization is actually requesting my data? If I have this three, I feel, and we make sure that whatever organization managing the database, they cannot do anything else. So it means that anything that touched the data has to be recorded some way. And anything touched the data has to be trackable for us to know. I mean, of course, somebody in the organization will not be happy. I mean, Google will not be happy if we have the trackability to look at all the data that we have. It just with but if I want to create a new service, I think that from all four of you perspective, if I have a database service looks like this, do you think that's actually a pretty good confidentiality or privacy protection?
I do have a question. Like, I guess this is more of like an edge case, but like, what if like this person was like committed like some crime and like, I don't know, some like government agency was doing some investigation on them, and they needed to like access their information like that. So wouldn't it be better in that case that the person doesn't know that they're under investigation, or it could like tip them off, right?
So I'm thinking about the database could be a two different parts. There's a one part of the database that's used for applications such as entering the bar and things like that. So it's basically the for those kind of application. But I trust that there will be another database, regardless whether we want to do this or not. There will be another database, which is the investigation they can access. They can still access this database. They can probably fake an organization to actually request it. For example, I'm pretending I'm bar number 2, and then I'm actually accessing your record, but I'm actually the information I'm doing is for other purpose. That's entirely possible, but at least you have some record for some of that. Yeah. Yes, that is actually important. But the other thing, which is also important for this database is more like the public community try to access this data for the stated purpose. Obviously, there is another issue, which is the right to be forgotten. Is that there is some of the information. I have a DUI long time ago, and it's keep blocking me to be able to go to the bar I really want to go to? And can I actually ask that DUI to be forgotten from this database? That could be another issue, but I feel the other way to address this issue is to change the program, Python program, such that it will set certain kind of time for not looking into that. So we don't erase any record in the database, but we change the Python program about how that should be validated. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm actually surprised. One of the number I should know, but I didn't. 39% of people trust Google, and only 7% trust the government. Yeah, we have.
Yeah, there was another statistic that it was like in the same thing. I just didn't include it, but it said that people trust Amazon more than Google. Well, this was like a few years ago, but there was like Amazon, then Google, then like the government. So I thought that was interesting because I feel like now people like really don't like Amazon.
I think in some sense that makes sense because Google, they are the biggest advertisement company. So if they're doing advertisement or business intelligence, they tend to use the data more aggressive than a company like Amazon. They're basically try to use the information to recommend their own product. So Amazon is doing internal advertisement recommendation while Google is doing external, and which is why Google is more, which is more aggressive in that. But I guess the government is always an interesting case that there's some issue that people just really don't feel very well for the government side. I do think that trying to make the government or the nonprofit organization working with government more transparent, it might have some good outcome about that. Is the chances that, okay, as you say, I think I agree with you. We like to trust NPO more than the corporate. It's just that how does the NPO is going to be funded to do that work that's secure and robust enough to take care of the issue. That would be interesting to know. I'm actually thinking about one of the core issue you probably didn't realize. You actually center around the issue of biometrics identification, but our discussion is essentially turning into a database that's actually recording our activity, our behavior. It's like if you think about this, is that we as a citizen will contribute our information over there, and that information either voluntarily or non-voluntarily, and that information is going to be accessed by a Python program or whatever program, a script we submit for the different application, and that information is shared by all of us. If a nonprofit organization is going to do that, that will be very interesting. That is almost like a Wikipedia, but that Wikipedia actually has a lot of privacy protection, and the information is shared by an organization like a Wikipedia. I think that will be that's actually new. We don't have that actually, because we are so worried about privacy that we kind of reject our idea immediately. We're just assuming somebody by law, like in New York, has to do that, so we have to deal with this problem. But I'm actually thinking if there is a nonprofit organization is just keeping a database of everybody, and with a trust model, transparent, I think there is a lot of good application. And yet, if we trust the nonprofit organization, I think the privacy will be reasonably protected, and we can play the balance between privacy and safety. I think that would be interesting. Okay.
it's also one thing to have a database with all of this data, but if you can control what gets sent out, like only having like a true or false that gets sent out, like zero knowledge proofs, where it's like you have a request and then you just prove that, you know, it's valid. And you can have this database with like all the things like age and then criminal history and then like race and whatever, but then only send back true, you know. And I think that's a good way to manage the fact that yes, you do have all of this data, but you're still keeping privacy in check, because, you know, not everything is accessible, only the result at the end is.
Right. Yeah, there are two issues. I mean, you said zero knowledge proof, which is something which I haven't looked at for maybe 20 plus year already. And it used to be we handle some very simple concept that we can use a zero knowledge proof as a technique to verify that somebody actually knows some information, but without revealing the information. And that would be interesting, whether there is a practical way we can actually implement zero knowledge proof in this situation. But the other issue, which I'm interested also, Joshua, when you just say something about the information that we contribute. I mean, there is a conceptual database which is including all our information. So we're trusting a nonprofit organization to keep this information and tracking who actually access what information. Well, what happened if I actually store the information by myself? So each one of us is storing the information about all the criminal history about myself. But the thing is that there is a crypto protocol need to be in place such that I cannot selectively reveal part of the information. The crypto was developed such that I have to reveal all the history information. The only thing I can say is that, okay, I can reveal in the past 10 years. There is a time limit, but you have to disclose either all of them for people to run the Python program, or you actually reveal none of them, which means that you won't be able to get the verification you want. So that is something, the other model that might be possible. It means that the information is decentralized, but you have to contribute in a way that's actually you cannot just selectively hide certain information. And that will be interesting technology that people working on cryptography, integrity, authentication, or zero knowledge proof, they can actually be able to come up with a solution. In that sense, that the privacy could be even more rigorously protected. We still might need a nonprofit organization, but the nonprofit organization, their role got reduced to handle certain things. But that will be an interesting secure computation. Maybe Professor Phil Rockaway will know, or Professor Matt Franklin will know exactly how to do that. Yeah.
Okay. Could another solution be? Oh, sorry. You. Could another solution be like not recording like logs of who is like entering the bar, like just returning your verification and to increase the privacy?
So you're saying that it's doing verification, but not recording who is entering the bar. Well, the issue with that is that if I want to do the safety protection, I want to know whether you will behave aggressively after 2 cups of martinis, for example, and that level, whether we think that level of information is useful, valuable. If that information is useful, I mean, it's essentially whether we think we want to have a way to track how how many cups of beers we drink, or how much protein we're taking, or things like that, in terms of our life log, which I should call a life log, how many steps you walk. And those are all the information about ourselves, right? And the thing is that whether we want to just log everything, but keep them to ourselves, and then when something application is needed, that we might have the information in an integrity way to be able to verify some application. I guess that is extended. It's not just about entering the bar, but more like the role of information and the application that those information could be used in a way that's protected and still benefit to the society. I guess that is a more higher level question we want to ask ourselves. I mean, biometric identification is a good starting point. In fact, I think it's a very good starting point. But this work has potential to be a broader service for the application like this. I'll be interested to see what New York. So when will New York has the law has been passed, or still need to be voted on?
So pretty much like it was a few days before you first had us get into groups. I think like late April it was proposed, and it's been on the Senate floor for the past month, so it hasn't been voted in yet.
Okay, interesting. We'll see that, and maybe there will be public hearing and things like that. Yeah, I will be interested. Yeah, that's it's there are some interesting things. Yeah, we should keep following. I'll be personally interested to see how their policy and exactly how will they implement. Yeah, it's interesting. Okay, all right. I think that's all the questions I have. Do you have any question for me before I turn off the? Okay, let me turn off the recording.